Hello, everyone, and welcome to our March Bhavana chat. I'm Shay with Curate Soul. It's an honor to be here with you, and thank you for taking the time to listen. We are entering into the last 4 or so weeks of the theme, the bhavana, that we've been working with since the beginning of the year. So this year I am exploring through our monthly chats, through my public yoga classes, as well as my own personal practice and private offerings, the Puruṣārtha. And the Puruṣārtha are the 4 aims of the soul. And the first one is dharma, and dharma actually directs the other 3, Puruṣārtha. And so we spent the beginning of the year looking at various kind of translations of dharma, what dharma meant, how it applied to us on an individual level, as well as the collective and universal level. Last month, we explored Dharma's relationship to Ayurveda and how the sister science of yoga offers us the tools to live and stay vital and healthy so that we can pursue our Dharma. And when we look at some of the translations of Dharma that mean alignment with nature, upholding cosmic order, natural law, then we really begin to see kind of the relationship with Ayurveda, the similarities in the philosophy of following our rhythms, following our cycles, and that remembrance that we are not separate from nature. And so this month I am really inspired by one of the classic Indian texts on spirituality, the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita is actually a smaller portion of a much larger epic poem called the Mahabharata. And in the Mahabharata, the Puruṣārtha is actually discussed. So these 4 different desires. And the Gita is actually a text on Dharma. And so I would just like to kind of weave that into the last 4 weeks or so that we are exploring this first Puruṣārtha. And so looking at chapter 3, verse 35 of the Gita, Krishna and Arjuna are in conversation. So the Gita is this back and forth dialogue between Arjuna, a warrior, and his teacher Krishna. And this particular verse, Krishna is saying it is better to strive in one's own dharma than to succeed in the dharma of another. And so we can look at kind of the story of the Gita like many myths. There's a lot of symbolism that we can draw from. But also the battlefield is seen as an allegory for the ethical and moral struggles of human life. One of those struggles is our dharma. What is our dharma? How do we continue to walk our dharmic path, to uphold our dharma? I think oftentimes, especially here in the West, we think, okay, so we're aligning with dharma, we're upholding our dharma. And if I do that, everything's going to be easy. That is not the case. There certainly will be challenges upon our path. Our life is certainly, we're going to meet moments that are challenging, but also moments that are full of ease, that are very blissful and full of joy and happiness. And so we can kind of look at this conversation and then kind of see the parallels with life and our path, especially our dharmic path. We also tend, I think, here in the West to get kind of sidetracked with all of the external messages that tell us this is what we should be doing. This is the path that we should follow based on what maybe somebody else would like us to do that really supports them in the end, and not so much supporting our path or that divine part of ourselves, or because of the many other things that can be wrapped up in our different communities, whether it's social, economical, or cultural communities, looking maybe to serve not the greater good, but maybe an individual. And so just taking the time to kind of reflect on how we may be tangled up in some of that and that messaging that can cause challenges as we walk our path. And so this particular verse from the Gita, that it's better to strive in our own dharma than to succeed in the dharma of someone else, is Again, we're often maybe told that we should be following a certain path, but that path may not be ours. And maybe we follow that path really well and we're really good at something, we're succeeding, and by all standards outside of us, or cultural standards or society standards, we are succeeding, we're doing really well. But then there's this place inside of us that maybe is not at peace, that feels that something is just slightly off. And that is probably due to the fact that we are fulfilling somebody else's dharma. We're not fulfilling our own. And then those moments that we're walking our path that are a bit challenging, and we may want to say, you know what, I'm kind of done with this. Let's try something that's a little bit easier. Reminding ourselves that it's okay to make mistakes, to not always want to be doing what needs to be done, or there's responsibilities that may be ours. Yes, there are things that we have to do, things that we are responsible for upholding that cosmic order, for upholding our individual dharma, but also as we're upholding our own dharma, we're upholding the collective dharma. So remembering that we are not just kind of this solo entity, that we are part of a web of connection. And so when we're looking at our dharma and our dharmic path, how is that relating to the world around us, to our community, to the collective, as well as Mama Earth, our responsibility to take care of our very first mother. And so I encourage you to kind of maybe explore these areas where you know that you've had a certain responsibility or a certain path to walk, but it became challenging. And maybe you began to want to deviate from the path or take a different path that you know felt a little bit easier. And then what were the choices that you made to either switch paths or to stay on the path that you were on, that you knew was actually the path that you needed to be on, even through the challenges? What kept you coming back to that path, or that realization that this was your path and maybe not necessarily the easy road? Because in the end, what this verse is really allowing us to see is that even through the challenges that we may encounter on our dharmic path, in kind of the greater bird's eye view of everything, we actually will suffer less because we are upholding our own dharma. We're not living this false life or living this life that's not in alignment with ourselves. And so continuing on with exploring the Gita, dharma, we're also going to look at karma. So this is a word that many of us are probably familiar with, karma. However, here in the West, the definition or the idea of karma has taken on this idea of a balancing of the proverbial scales, or a retaliation, or a punishment of some sort. A punishment or retaliation back to somebody who has done an injustice or some sort of bad behavior, that this particular action was maybe unwarranted or just really kind of negative. So karma is not a reward and punishment system. Karma actually just means action. And so it's a reminder to us that for every action, there is a reaction or a result. And so even when we think we're not taking action, that is an action in itself. And so remembering that there will always be some sort of result to whatever action that we are taking. Two actually results happen. There is the immediate result, and then there is the future result. And for the majority of the immediate results, we kind of know what to expect to happen. For that future outcome, however, we have no control of it. We really have no control over the result of any of our actions, the fruits of our actions. That's also stated in the Gita. If you've not read the Gita, it's certainly a beautiful text that I recommend maybe checking out at your local library or just getting from Amazon. One of my favorite translations, actually, little detour here, is this one by Eknath Easwaran. And so the actual translation is here, but also his commentary. And it makes it just really approachable and applicable to our life here. So back to karma, back to the fruits of our actions, and back to the choices that we are making. Again, karma just means action. So for everything that we're doing, something will result. That immediate result, let's look at, for instance, say we're going to make a donation to a local charity. That immediate result is that we're that amount of money more poor. So let's say we gave $100. So we're $100 poorer. That's the immediate result of our action. But that future result, we don't know. We have no idea where that is going to lead. And so we are reminded here in the Gita that our choices, our actions, that is the only choice that we have. To take that action, to control how we act, how we think, how we respond. But the fruit of that action is out of our control. And it's when we try to control the result that the suffering happens. So how does that relate to dharma? Well, all of our past actions, all of our past karmas have brought us to this present moment in our life. So maybe we take a moment to think back, what are the choices, what are the actions that you've taken in the past that have brought you to some of the current situations that you may find yourself in, good, bad, neutral, whatever it may be. And then the choices and actions we were making in this present moment, this exact moment, are paving the future path. And so considering, once again, we don't have any sort of control over the future, but are we taking the actions, the karmas that are in alignment with our dharma? When we do, again, we will find that there is less suffering when we are aligning with our nature. Let's look at this from the Ayurvedic perspective. Ayurveda offers us tools and the remembrance to align ourselves with the rhythms of nature, which seems outside of us. However, we are nature. We're not separate from that. So we have very similar rhythms. We have a circadian rhythm where we are awake for a length of period during daylight. We are asleep at nighttime for most of us if we're following the natural rhythms. There are times that we are taking meals. There are times in our life that we are bearing more fruit in a kind of metaphorical way. There are times that we need more of a turning inward and dormant period, our own wintering in a way. And so aligning with those cycles. And when we align with those cycles, we're upholding universal dharma, and we're also creating a basis for health. Because we are upholding cosmic order. We are aligning with nature. Now, when we begin, for whatever reason, to maybe stay up really late, sleep in for a really long time, or sleep during the day and spend most of our waking time at night, when we have inconsistent meal times, or we're skipping meals, or we're always going, and never giving ourselves a period of rest and dormancy, we are then beginning to create dis-ease in the mind, in the body, and the spirit. We're not upholding cosmic order. We're not creating vitality. We're actually using our life force and letting it just kind of empty itself without filling our cup again. And so if we continue on that path of living in misalignment with nature, with universal dharma, what happens is that future karma will most likely create suffering. That suffering could be a chronic illness. It could be a sense of separation from the world around us, or from our true nature, that divine part of ourselves. And so just understanding that the actions that we're taking are paving the way for the future. And where we are right now is established by those actions that we took in the past. So it's not a rewards punishment system. We cannot control the outcome of the actions that we take, but we can control the actions that we decide to take, the choices that we make. And so that is where karma is interwoven with dharma. So I'll encourage you once again, maybe as we move through this month, to just reflect on what actions have you taken that have brought you here to this present moment. Again, whether you're in moments of challenge, joy, ease, neutrality, growth, it's not a good or bad, it's not a judgment, it's not a comparison, it's just an awareness. And also in the Gita, there is this verse that states there is a force within us that forces you to act. So inaction is actually not possible. Again, when I mentioned earlier that sometimes we decide that maybe doing nothing is better, that's still a choice. That's still an action. It's not possible to not take an action. And so in the Gita, this force, what that force is, there's a force within us that forces us to act. That force is the drive of the Puruṣārtha, the four aims of the soul. And then lastly, I would kind of like to look at dharma in relation to the individual, the universal, and the collective. So similar to, karma. We mentioned dharma back in January and how there was an individual, a universal, collective dharma. This is the same for karma. So there are places that have karma. There are certain times that have a particular karma based on past actions and choices of groups, of a society, of a culture. And so the individual dharma and the individual karma is not separate from that. It's interwoven, just like anything else that we've been speaking about over the past several months. So we can look at how a cultural or a community's actions affects us on an individual level, but also the collective level, and how those effects determine and maybe drive the choices that we make. So actions done in alignment with dharma produce what is considered a pleasurable karma. And actions done against dharma produce what is considered a painful karma. Again, this is not, I really want to stress, this is not a rewards and punishment system. And that pleasurable and painful can be subjective and also related to your individual dharma and related to a collective dharma as well. What these practices of yoga, whether it's yoga asana, meditation, pranayama, what Ayurveda can help us do is, as we mature along our spiritual journey, we begin to realize that we cannot avoid pain or pleasure. That's just a part of this human life. What happens, though, as we progress and mature on this path is that as we begin to understand pain and pleasure cannot be avoided, what we do understand is that our relationship to it changes. And so when we say that there is dharma that is pleasurable and that there is, karma that is pleasurable and karma that is painful, yes, that will stay, but really our relationship to those karmas changes. And we have these practices, these tools of yoga and Ayurveda to help us kind of unwind ourselves from our karmas and other karmas. And so the path that we walk when we are practicing yoga and Ayurveda allows us to get out of this reactive loop, this loop of always reacting to the next thing that seems to be happening to us instead of for us. And so we can step back and we can walk around a situation and look at it with kind of a fresh perspective as we begin to understand how the actions that we've taken have maybe brought us to this particular present moment, the situation that we're in. So as we close today, I would like to just leave you with a little quote by Swami Vivekananda. Do not be passive. Free will is a gift of being human. Other animals act purely out of instinct. We have choice. This is a blessing. We have to understand how to choose responsibly and appropriately, not to choose in such ways that cause harm and harm to self and to others. So I'll read that one more time. Do not be passive. Free will is a gift of being human. Other animals act purely out of instinct, and we have choice. This is a blessing. We have to understand how to choose responsibly and appropriately, not to choose in such ways that cause harm to self and others. So I hope that you enjoyed our time together today. It has been a wonderful experience taking a deep dive into Dharma over the past several months, and I look forward to continuing on with the next Puruṣārtha next month. So I hope you'll join me for that. In the meantime, I do have an upcoming offering honoring the coming of spring. We have a spring equinox gathering next Monday, March the 20th from 6:30 to 8:30. I'm co-hosting this with Sarah from The Alchemistic. She's been my co-host for the past year, and we are very excited to continue offering this to our community. It will be offered virtually, which it has been for the past year, but we're also opening up an in-person opportunity as well. And so if you're here in Savannah or near to Savannah and you would like to join us, there are a few spots that remain. You can find the registration link in the newsletter. And if you have questions, feel free to shoot me a message. We will spend the evening chatting about the current astrology, the significance of the seasonal transition, the moving into spring, goddess mythology, what goddess is associated with the coming of spring. We will also explore some Ayurvedic rituals that will help you transition from late winter into spring and kind of support this natural feeling of cleansing, of lightening. We'll also take a moment to find some deep rest. So I will be guiding you through a short yoga nidra practice. And then we'll finish with a collective tarot reading. So Sarah will be offering a collective reading as well and diving deep into the messages that the tarot is bringing us. So once again, if you have any questions, any comments, any feedback, I would love to hear from you. Don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you for taking the time to join. See you soon.